Today, we talk with Congressman Richard Hudson, the highest-ranking North Carolinian in history, whose working-class roots and steady hand led to a critical Republican majority in the House ready to back President Trump's big change agenda. But unlike 4 years ago, change has become a rallying cry across America. From Ballard Studios' remote location in Tampa, Florida, it's 13th and Park.
You and I can differ, but that doesn't mean you and I cannot be friends.
That often is missing in politics.
We went from North Korea to Eminem. That's a lot, man.
Aliens could have invaded and nothing would surprise me at this point.
It's a nightmare.
Those are the facts.
We have to solve everything.
What's in this tea?
Congressman, great to have you on 13th and Park. These are chilly days in Washington. Exciting, but chilling, right?
They are. You know, it was warmer back home over Christmas, but these are exciting times. I don't know that I've been more excited than any time in my time in Congress. The American people have given us an opportunity.
You've said that the people in your district were kind of fed up with the way things were going in the country, the direction of the country. Do you think that beyond the electoral mandate that happened in 2024, that the American people really are thirsting for the kind of change that the president, you and your colleagues are setting out to achieve?
I think there's no question, Adam. I mean, you've seen a realignment. You know, we've seen a coalition come out and support President Trump and his agenda like we've never seen before, with African-American men in particular, with Hispanics. And the president's popularity, the popularity of his agenda has really opened up political opportunities for us as a campaign committee as we look into the next election. I think we've got opportunities now to pick up seats that we didn't think were achievable before. But if we can, first and foremost, do what we said we were going to do, I think the voters will reward us. And I think we'll be able to keep these coalitions together and expand the political map.
Why do you think the American people are more interested in, more ready for this kind of change today than when President Trump was first elected and started to serve in the beginning of 2017?
Well, I think the problems are real. I mean, I think the challenges people are facing out there, they're feeling in their everyday lives, the cost of things, the crime that's happening all over the country in people's neighborhoods, seeing this open border and hearing about terrorists and criminals coming across. I think just people very tangibly feeling the effects of really bad policies. I think that's why you're seeing such a visceral response to President Trump.
There was a vote recently, obviously, on the Laken Riley Act, where more than 40 Democrats, congressmen, sided with the majority, the Republican majority, to make that the law of the land. Does that act go beyond making a statement about illegal immigration and border security, and maybe, just maybe, suggest that moving forward, this Congress is going to pull together more often than not on issues that impact change that improves the quality of life and feelings of security of every American?
Well, I guarantee you that the Congress is going to focus on those issues. You know, we heard the voters loud and clear. And, I would argue that members of Congress on the Republican side went out and campaigned on these issues. And we told voters, we hear you and we will address these problems. And you can count on us to do that. You know, it's not just us. It's a Republican Senate. It's President Trump. You know, we all campaign on a unified set of issues, and you're going to see us address them. And this Laken Riley Act, first out of the gate, it's common sense. You know, if you're a criminal alien here illegally, you need to be deported. And the fact that a whole bunch of Democrats voted against this common sense legislation, that's why I was shaking my head when you first mentioned the bill. I mean, it's like the Democrats have learned nothing. You know, the American people rejected them and rejected their open border policies, and yet they're still voting for this kind of garbage. Either the Democrats are going to have to start voting on behalf of their constituents, or they're going to continue to lose power in Washington.
So top priorities for the new Congress, as you see it, especially in the first 100 days, what can the American people expect?
Well, we're going to secure the border. You're going to see very strong border legislation. We're going to try to tackle this inflationary cost first and foremost by energy policy. You know, the Democrats' energy policy of scarcity is one of the major drivers of inflation. And we have abundant American energy, and Republicans are going to go out and get it. And I think you're going to see prices drop immediately from that because of the way the energy futures market works, as well as making tax cuts permanent so that we give certainty to the economy and a commitment to cut spending. The federal government spending is out of control. We're spending money on all kinds of garbage. And so I think right out of the gate in our reconciliation package, and it's going to be one big, beautiful bill. There's been some talk about the strategy of whether it should be one bill or two bills, but I think we're all in agreement now. It's going to be one big, beautiful bill. It's going to include those items I just mentioned. And I think first part of the year, you're going to see that signed by President Trump.
Well, the new words, the Department of Government Efficiency, Elon Musk and Vivek Ramaswamy, they're going to go at it, right? In every department of government. How much of that will be reflected in this big, beautiful bill? And also moving forward so we don't continue to backslide and put merciless debt, almost unrepayable debt on the backs of our children.
I think what's cool about Elon and Vivek and the Doge is they're making this cool. Nerds like you and me, we've always been looking to cut spending out of government and, looking at programs that are wasteful. But these guys are going to have a podcast, going to compete with yours every week, talking about these different things they want to cut. And it's going to be cool to talk about it. If you look at the younger generations, they supported President Trump. And I think a big part of that is because they're sick of us spending their money on wasteful things.
Well, what's different, I think, this time than a couple of years ago, of course, is the bureaucracy. I think when President Trump first came into power in 2017, he had to figure out things, right? His first time in elective office, he had to figure out how to make things work, what forces would inevitably try to come up against him. But this time, Congressman, it looks like he's prepared for this. And I don't see the bureaucracy necessarily being able to fight what the American people have been demanding and what this president and this Congress intends to do.
I think you're right. I mean, President Trump came in the first time with the businessman's mentality. He had the right ideas, but I think it's hard to comprehend just how devious and complicated the bureaucracy is in this town. You talk about a swamp. I mean, there really is a swamp. There really is a professional class of people. Their job is to defend their jobs and make sure they get to keep them. President Trump is a lot more savvy about how those processes work. The other thing is he's got, I think, a deeper bench to draw from for these, not just the cabinet secretaries, but the undersecretaries and some of these other positions. He's got a lot more people now that he trusts, that he's appointing to these positions. And so we can count on them to not be serving their own agendas, but to be serving the president's agenda.
Well, I'll tell you, I see these confirmation hearings to come as live theater at its best, right? The American people, for the first time, are going to get a real taste of who else will be joining President Trump to forge the change we've just been talking about. Is there one particular confirmation hearing you're most interested in, intrigued by, because of the nature of the nominee and that nominee's maybe determination to make this agenda the reality for all Americans?
Well, that's a great question because, the president has appointed some fantastic folks. I think of Linda McMahon, part of education. I mean, she is such a savvy business person, such an incredible person. She's going to be fantastic in that role. I'm looking forward to her hearing. I'd love to see someone try to challenge her or trip her up on something. She's going to do her homework and she's very smart. I think of Pam Bondi, somebody really well. Yeah. What a fantastic appointment. I feel sorry for the Democrat senators who are going to try to take her on. Her hearing is going to be fun to watch because she is so prepared and is going to do such a fine job as our Attorney General. Think about Sean Duffy, Lee Zeldin. These are all brilliant people who are going to do a fantastic job implementing the president's agenda.
And unlike when the president was first elected, right, everyone's kind of rowing in the same direction. And some criticize that by saying, well, doesn't that mean that these cabinet members are just going to do what the president wants? Well, what the president wants is what the American people want, right, Congressman? They want change. And it seems like all these nominees, if there's one thing that unites them, they're going to drive for that. They're going to ask the questions that have not been asked. They're going to demand the answers that have not been forthcoming in the past. And I think the American people are going to feel good about the experience where government has to not only explain itself, but it would be forced to do, frankly, a better job on behalf of the people they serve.
I think you're exactly right. Another example is Doug Collins at the VA. Mm-hmm. Doug Collins is a dear Christian brother. We served together in Congress. We were in a Bible study together. He's someone who served in the Air Force. He's just a fantastic guy. He's now going to be at the Veterans Administration, and he's going to make sure that the VA is responsive to the needs of our veterans. You could just go on and on. I mean, the team that the president is putting together is fantastic.
As chairman of the Communications and Technology Subcommittee, responsible for the FCC, the NTIA, and other things, how do you feel about the revelations that have come out over the last year or two about Chinese interest, especially Huawei and ZTE, and the way they were inculcating themselves into the infrastructure of America's communication network? How concerned should Americans be about that? And how much more do we need to push beyond the rip and replace program that has already been put before a vote? What more do we need to do, Congressman, to feel safe that our infrastructure is not just roads, highways, ports, and seaports? It's also the very things we use to communicate with each other.
No, it's a real concern, and we've got to be vigilant. But the American people can be assured that President Trump understands this. The people he's putting in place understand it. And certainly the House majority, we understand the threat from China. This is an issue I've been working on for a long time, not only here in this country, but trying to convince our allies around the world how dangerous Huawei is and the Chinese efforts are. We had a lot of people in Europe kind of telling us we were exaggerating until COVID happened. And then it opened a lot of eyes. And so we're seeing a lot of our allies now removing this malign influence and the threat. It's something, we've made a lot of progress here in this country, and we're going to continue to make a lot of progress, but it still remains our number one threat. Chinese influence, Chinese infiltrating our infrastructure, Chinese spying, and it's other actors too, but China is just the biggest and the wealthiest, but we've got to continue to be smart about it.
Do you expect there to be maybe a major breakthrough in the first couple of months of this new presidency in terms of foreign policy? And more specifically, we just heard President Trump basically drawing a line with Hamas, saying you will release these hostages almost with an implied or else. How much is maybe the world needing a strong president to help lead the world to do what is right and fair, whereas before it seems like all the efforts of diplomacy and words and good intentions seem to yield little, if any, progress?
Well, I think it's one of the most important reasons why we needed President Trump to come back to the White House. And when he was president before, I heard people criticize the way he said things, but he was a strong leader, and we had unprecedented peace while he was president. We didn't have any new wars started. I can remember when Vladimir Putin put Russian troops on the Ukrainian border while Trump was president, and President Trump said, "You set one foot in Ukraine and I'll burn Moscow." Well, the media went crazy. Oh, he's going to start World War III. He can't talk like that. Well, what happened is Putin withdrew the troops. And then you fast forward to Joe Biden, who says, well, we expect them to invade anyway. And of course they invade. And frankly, I think the big reason Ukraine happened was because of the weakness he showed in Afghanistan. And I think, frankly, you've already seen some realignment in the world. I mean, you've already seen some actors in the world change their behavior preparing for a Trump presidency. And, I hope Hamas is listening to him, and they better believe him that, if they don't release our hostages, there's going to be real consequences for them.
As chairman of the National Republican Congressional Committee, coming out of a wild campaign cycle, right? You made a point about recruiting candidates who have compelling life stories and compelling experience, relevant experience. How important is that to continue to upgrade the quality of men and women who are serving us in Congress and who are helping lead this revolution of change?
I think it's the key. Candidate quality is the key ingredient. If you don't have a great candidate that even Democrats and unaffiliated will take a second look at, you can't win in tough places. I give you an example, Gabe Evans in Colorado 8. This is a district, it's a northern suburb of Denver, racked by crime, racked by fentanyl death, just really a place that was struggling. And who better to represent them than a Hispanic police officer who's, tough on crime and is willing to do the tough things, running against a woman who voted to legalize fentanyl when she was in the state legislature. What a stark contrast. Recruiting candidates, as you say, with compelling life stories, candidates who fit their district, candidates who not just talk the talk, but have walked the walk. That's how we win. And we'll continue to use that formula to recruit going forward.
Well, as you look forward to 2026, and I want to get beyond the here and now, what must Republicans do to be in the best position in 26 as they were in 24 to start this, again, movement of change moving forward?
Well, the first thing is we need to do what we said we're going to do. We promised the American people, you trust us with power, we will secure the border, we will unleash American energy, we'll drive down inflation, we'll cut government spending. We've got to do those things. We promised them we need to do it, and I believe we will. There are 13 Democrat House members representing districts that President Trump carried, but there are only 3 Republicans in districts that Kamala Harris carried. So if you look at the map, it favors House Republicans. We're going to definitely be on offense going into 2026. We're looking at growing our majority. First step, we got to go recruit the right candidates. We got to get strong candidates in each of these seats. And then we got to go raise the money to fund these campaigns. The Democrats have traditionally done a better job than us at fundraising. They have some structural advantages. They have a lot more money to bring to bear. And so we've got to work hard to make sure our candidates have the funds they need to tell their stories.
How much of an impact, Congressman, did your parents have on the path you've chosen to take? I mean, your dad in construction, your mom a school teacher, kind of the epitome of the melding of hard work and public service. Did they really, by example, kind of compel you to move down the path you now find yourself on?
Well, my parents were a huge influence on me. I think you could go back even one generation further. My mother's father, my grandfather, was a 30-year city councilman in a small town in eastern North Carolina. He was a Democrat who was pro-life, pro-Second Amendment, voted for Jesse Helms and Ronald Reagan. He had a big influence on me just in looking at the political arena as an honorable place to serve. But my dad, he was a small business owner. He started a construction business with a truck and a hammer and, a dream and a bank loan, and grew it into a successful business. My mother was a career public school teacher, retired after 32 years of teaching. And the lessons I learned from my dad about hard work, about, nobody else is going to do it. You got to show up and do it. My lessons from my mother, the last half of her tenure, she was teaching early childhood programs. So kids coming from really tough backgrounds.
Yeah.
Broken homes and dealing with a lot of issues, really opened my heart, I think, to people who are struggling, and realizing, people going through tough times, sometimes they need a hand out to them and a hand up. But people can also be crushed by a federal government and government programs that are supposed to help them, but they end up trapping them into the cycles of poverty. Her dedication to public service is something that carried over to me as well. And I think probably the biggest influence, though, is their faith. I grew up in a Christian home. My relationship with Jesus Christ has certainly influenced me and made me a much better person, and certainly a much better representative of the people. And so I appreciate my parents for instilling that faith in me as well.
I think they appreciate you, Congressman. Well, thank you very much for joining us today. I wish you all the best. The job ahead is not an easy one, but it's absolutely necessary to kind of reinstill confidence in the American public that we are the greatest nation on earth, and we're ready once again to act like it.
Amen. I appreciate it. Good to be with you.
You too. Stay warm.